Alright, so a very good morning, afternoon, or evening to Dr. Tang. Today I'll be presenting you my assignment 2, titled Airbnbs in New York. So essentially what I'll be doing is walking you through the visualizations, which I portray as a story, and we will start with the research questions and the goal. So now on this slide we'll cover what are the research questions and what is the goal of this assignment. The main goal of this assignment is to create a set of dashboards useful to all stakeholders. What stakeholders we will cover after this. So first research question we need to answer is geographic distribution of the Airbnb listings within New York itself. The second question we'll talk about the average prices by room type and county. And then thirdly, we will explore average prices across specific neighborhoods. So in that sense, we will cover how to make these dashboards that I'm gonna make useful to stakeholders like guests, like hosts, and others. Alright, so let's move on to data preparation. So for data preparation, there were a few steps taken. So in this section, we'll cover the cleaning and the data integrity part. So to start with, I put all my dataset, downloaded it from Kaggle. Both of them were obtained from Kaggle. The first dataset, the main one, I downloaded it and uploaded it to Google Colab, where it was cleaned. So by cleaned, I mean that I put it into Google Colab, and then I checked for missing values, and I found 2 columns that had missing values: last review and reviews per month, with a lot of missing values, and it took up about 20% of the entire data set. So what I did was I removed those columns that removed those rows which had missing values of those columns. So once I did that, I uploaded the dataset back into Tableau, and the first thing I did was data integrity. So then I obtained my second dataset, which was similar, and I generated a graph, a chart, which you can see, which was done for cross-checking. So you can see that the trends are similar for room type for both datasets, and so this was the preparation done to start the entire visualization. So now moving on to the visualization itself. Now we are in Tableau. You can see that this is the first visualization, right? So this is a line chart where the line chart shows the number of reviews by months from January to July. So what does this line plot illustrate? So basically this line plot illustrates the trend of the Airbnb's reviews from January to July 2019. So the data set initially was a large data set, but I've narrowed it down to 2019, so it would be more timely and relevant. So by seeing this, it shows a clear representation of the monthly change in the number of reviews based on months, and you can clearly see that there is a spike from May to June, especially in June, 12,000, and then there's a downward trend in July. This could be something to do with more people visiting these Airbnbs in June because it's summertime and New York is a touristy place, and it's a nice place to visit in June, right? So moving on to the second visualization, here we see a density map. So what is this density map? So this visualization essentially provides a heat map showing the density of the Airbnb's listings across New York. So this density map basically offers a quick overview of the areas with the highest concentration of the Airbnb's listings. So you can clearly see that the darker the areas, especially in Manhattan and other areas like this, you can see that Manhattan has one of the highest densely populated areas, which means that there are a lot of Airbnbs there. So you can the use of the dark theme to contra with this makes it a bit easier to read, rather than if it was lighter themed, it would be a bit difficult to differentiate the darker shades based off density. So moving on to the next visualization, here we see a Airbnb county map. So later in the dashboard, you'll see why and how I placed these two visualizations together and why they're useful. So for this visualization, you can see each of the neighborhood groups: Manhattan, Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. They are color coded. On the right, you can see, and this shows a very like it gives a geographical context for the density map. And why it's useful is in the dashboard. When I explain the dashboard itself, you will see. But what you see here is the use of this specific visualization is to understand the spatial distribution of listings across different counties. Counties are what Americans refer to like districts or cities and stuff, like special distribution, so that when people, users or guests, want to understand which part of New York they want to stay in, they can understand using this. So here you see this visualization is a neighborhood map with all of the Airbnbs. So this map presents a detailed view of the Airbnb listings across different neighborhoods. So the neighborhoods are color coded again. So it allows viewers to identify the spread of Airbnb listings across different neighborhoods. Like I said, the use of the color coding in this sense helps distinguish between those neighborhoods, and it provides a visual guide to understand the data. So there's a filter on the top right for price. And then for this, there's also a function where you can highlight one neighborhood if you know specifically which neighborhood you prefer, or you have been recommended, or you intend to stay in specifically. Or you can just go through and understand what are the neighborhoods, where are they located. All right, so this will be more useful when we talk about its use in the dashboard itself. Okay, moving on to the next visualization. So this visualization is a visualization showing the average prices across these neighborhoods, like we talked about earlier. So this visualization, first you see all these neighborhood groups, which is Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, as well as Manhattan. They're color coded, as previously stated as well. So red Manhattan and stuff. And what is the use of this visualization is that it shows the average price for that specific neighborhood. So if you kind of know, or you want to just go through the rough prices, you can see this very clearly in this visualization. So for Bronx, you can see that Sputian Doyville has average price of 180, which is the highest in Bronx. And there's also a red running average line drawn for each neighborhood group, which shows that, okay, for Bronx, has an average of 81.73 for all the Airbnbs there. But when it comes to Brooklyn, which is more center, you can see that the average goes up a bit to 138. So here you can compare different neighborhoods based on the neighborhood group, and you can just get a rough idea in context of the price of the neighborhoods. And then, okay, so once you have established, okay, where you want to stay, then you've established the average price of those places that you want to stay. Now you want to see if these places have an average room type that caters to you, right? So that's important as well. So another factor is room type. So what I did here is presented a bar chart which divides average price of the room type by county. So you can see in Bronx, the average price for entire homes, private rooms, and shared rooms. And then you can see this across all neighborhood groups, right? So you can see Staten Island, and clearly the one that stands out the most expensive in this case is the entire homes Airbnbs in Manhattan. It goes for on average 238. And the lowest or the cheapest is a shared room in Staten Island, for example, right? And it goes for $21.50. So this is to give you a more broken down rough idea of the rooms and the room situations, and where you can make comparisons to the price. Okay, so in the first dashboard, it's titled Airbnbs in New York 2019. So this dashboard incorporates the density map, the county map, the average price by room type of county, and the average price across the neighborhoods visualizations. So these this interface, this dashboard gives you a wholesome, more holistic view to make your choices. So let's talk about the positioning first, actually, before we move on to how we use this. So the positioning was done strategically because first you identify the densely populated areas, which here you can see on this side. And why the density map is put on the left and the county map right beside it is so you can see when you notice any densely populated areas, you can compare it to which neighborhood group it belongs to. So you can see again, like I said previously, the densely populated areas are around Manhattan, which is central New York. And the not so densely populated areas are like Staten Island, for instance. Here you can see this is Staten Island, or Queens, or towards the bottom part of Queens, right? So the positioning is done very strategically from left to right, where they check the densely populated areas. Actually, why do they need to check densely populated areas? Is so that the more the populated the area is with Airbnb listings, that is populated in terms of Airbnb listings. So the more the populated that area is, the more the likelihood that they have more options, right? So the more options, there's a likelihood that they find something that is unique. And the more densely populated areas also indicate that it's a prime location, or it's more central, around the unique sites that they would need to visit. So from this, they can gauge it very well. And then we move on to the right hand side, where you can see on the top, you can see the chart where the average room is discussed. So once they understand the average price by room, they can then move on. Okay, so once they base it off, they see, okay, I like the average price of Bronx, so let me go through the neighborhood in Bronx, right? So let me see the cheapest one in Bronx, for instance. And once they identify a few names like Mount Eden, Hunts Point, these might be extremely cheap, but are they do they have good ratings, how many numbers of reviews they can then narrow it down. And how do they narrow it down? Let's move on to that now. Okay, so here you can see the Airbnb search engine, right? So why is this useful? And it's to narrow down, essentially. So like I was saying earlier, there was clearly, so once you narrow down the neighborhood group, okay, I want to live in Bronx, right? So but Bronx, I want to see these Airbnbs, and how many Airbnbs are there, right? And like, let's drill down further. So this Airbnb search engine is essentially for these guests to drill down further and understand the locations and the exact prices of the different Airbnbs in these neighborhoods that they identified, right? So let's take a look. For example, we identified Mount Eden, right? So let's filter and let's go Mount Eden. And here we can see that there are two distinctly placed Airbnbs here. And you can see when you go over one of the Airbnbs, which is for $55, you can see the name of the Airbnb, you can see the host name, and you can see the price, right? So by understanding this, you will understand, okay, then I can go into my Airbnb app and explicitly type the name of the Airbnb because I've identified, and then you can look at pictures of these Airbnbs, correct? So this gives them a good idea of which neighborhood they want to live in, and then they can see exactly on which street these Airbnbs are located. Why, for some reason, like you can try and justify why do these Airbnbs are expensive if they are closer to sites. For example, if we were to say Brooklyn Heights, right? We were to filter for Brooklyn Heights, we would be able to see that there are a lot, and it's more populated than the earlier one in Bronx, right? Because Brooklyn is a prime location. It's close to a lot of sites, right? And they can also then see which sites they're close to. So, for example, you can see Airbnbs like this, Brooklyn Heights, the name trendy apartment in historic Brooklyn Heights for $150. So this then enables the guests to break it down even further and understand the exact situation, the price, and makes them able to gather as much information as possible before they make the Airbnb booking. On the other hand, this dashboard also contains a price filter. So if you were to see, if you were to filter by the price a little, it gets lower, because if someone has a budget, this is useful to them. So let's say my budget is about £250 or dollars, for instance, and then you can see some Airbnbs disappear and the rest are all below 250. Or if I were to drill it down even further, about 150, you see that more and more it gets lesser and lesser, and then you get to understand the average price and try and pick the most suitable Airbnb later on. But here you can understand the names, right? And you can drill down what is in my budget and what isn't in my budget. So yeah, so that's essentially my presentation for Airbnbs in New York. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you again, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.